A homeless Navy SEAL followed his dog into a hidden mountain chamber and found proof his father's death was murder. The morning air cut through the Bitterroot Mountains like a knife as Ethan Walker and his retired K9 Titan climbed a snow-covered trail few people ever used. Homeless, haunted by war, and forgotten by nearly everyone, Ethan believed he had lost everything. But when Titan stopped beside a giant split stone that seemed to appear from nowhere, the old Navy SEAL stepped into a secret hidden for 40 years, one that would expose a deadly conspiracy and change his life forever. Comment 1 or 0 and tell us where you're watching from. The first light of dawn crept over the Bitterroot Range like a slow-moving tide of gold. Snow still clung to the upper peaks, glowing faintly beneath a pale Montana sky. The valley below remained wrapped in shadows, quiet except for the distant murmur of wind moving through pine trees. Parked beside an abandoned Forest Service road sat an aging blue pickup truck. The paint was faded. The driver's side door carried a long scrape that looked years old. A cracked side mirror rattled whenever the wind blew hard enough. For most people passing through western Montana, it was just another forgotten vehicle. For Ethan Walker, it was home. The 63-year-old former Navy SEAL sat upright in the driver's seat before sunrise, exactly as he did every morning. Sleep had abandoned him hours earlier. It usually did. The nightmares rarely allowed more than 2 or 3 uninterrupted hours. Some nights he woke believing he was back overseas. Other nights he woke searching for men who had been gone for decades. Tonight had been one of the bad ones. His hands still trembled slightly from the dream. A bead of sweat lingered near his temple despite the freezing temperature outside. Ethan rubbed his face and stared through the windshield. The mountains stood silent against the horizon. They never judged. They never asked questions. They never looked at him the way people did in town. Beside him, a large German shepherd slowly lifted his head. Amber eyes met Ethan's. The dog studied him carefully. Watching. Waiting. Understanding. "You knew, didn't you?" Ethan said quietly. The German shepherd responded by nudging Ethan's arm with his nose. The old soldier smiled. A real smile. The kind that appeared less often these days. "Yeah, I know." Titan rested his head on Ethan's lap. The dog was getting older now. Gray hairs had begun spreading around his muzzle. A small scar crossed one ear from an operation years ago. Another scar ran beneath his thick fur along his shoulder. Every mark told a story. Most people saw a dog. Ethan saw a brother. Titan had saved his life more than once, and Ethan had done the same for him. The bond forged between them had survived deserts, gunfire, explosions, and the long, difficult years afterward. When everyone else eventually drifted away, Titan remained. Always. Ethan reached behind the seat and grabbed an old thermos. The coffee inside had gone lukewarm. He drank it anyway. Money didn't allow for fresh coffee every morning. Neither did homelessness. Outside, frost coated the truck windows. A thin layer of snow covered the ground. The mountains looked beautiful, but beauty didn't pay bills. 3 years earlier, Ethan had owned a ranch. Not a huge one. Just enough land to call his own. Enough to raise horses. Enough to build a life. Enough to believe the future might still hold something worth fighting for. Now the ranch belonged to someone else. The bank had taken it. Or at least that was what the paperwork claimed. Lawyers. Missed payments. Foreclosure notices. Endless forms. The entire process had happened so fast that even now it felt unreal. By the time Ethan understood what was happening, everything was gone. The ranch, the house, the memories, even his marriage. His wife had left long before the foreclosure. Years of PTSD had built walls neither of them knew how to climb. Eventually, she stopped trying. Ethan never blamed her. Some wounds spread beyond the person carrying them. He understood that. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. A sharp bark broke his thoughts. Titan was standing now. tail wagging once. Ready. Every morning began the same way. The hike. No matter the weather. No matter how little sleep Ethan managed. The mountains were the only place where his mind became quiet. The only place where the past loosened its grip. "Let's go, partner." Titan immediately jumped from the truck. Ethan followed. Cold air hit his face like a slap. He welcomed it. The old pickup sat alone beside the tree line while man and dog started up the trail. Snow crunched beneath their boots and paws. The forest smelled of pine, earth, and winter. Titan moved confidently ahead. Not too far. Never too far. Always checking back. Always making sure Ethan followed. The trail climbed gradually through dense evergreens. Sunlight slowly spilled across the mountainside. Golden rays filtered through branches dusted with snow. The wilderness felt untouched. Ancient. Eternal. Ethan breathed deeply. For a few minutes, the noise inside his head faded. No lawyers. No foreclosure. No nightmares. Just mountains. Just silence. Just Titan. Hours later, they reached a rocky overlook high above the valley. Ethan sat on a fallen log. Titan settled beside him. Below them lay the small town of Pine Hollow. From this distance, it looked peaceful. Tiny houses, thin trails of chimney smoke, a church steeple catching sunlight. People beginning their day. Ethan rarely went into town unless absolutely necessary. Most folks were polite. Some even thanked him for his service. But there was always a certain look. Pity, curiosity, discomfort. The look people gave broken things. The local diner owner occasionally slipped him free coffee. The hardware store owner sometimes let him warm up during storms. Good people. Yet none of them really knew him. Not anymore. The version of Ethan Walker they remembered had disappeared years ago. The strong ranch owner, the respected veteran, the dependable neighbor, that man felt like someone else now. Titan suddenly stood. His ears perked forward. His posture changed, alert, focused. Ethan noticed immediately. Old habits never left. "What is it?" Titan stared into the forest, motionless, listening. A distant memory surfaced. Combat patrol. Afghanistan. Titan freezing exactly like that moments before detecting danger. Ethan's pulse quickened automatically. He scanned the tree line. Nothing. Just snow-covered pines swaying gently. After a moment, Titan relaxed. False alarm. Or maybe an animal. The dog returned and sat beside him. Ethan scratched behind his ears. "Still taking care of me." Titan leaned into the touch. The gesture carried years of trust, years of shared survival. The sun climbed higher. Eventually, they began the journey back down the mountain. As they descended, Ethan noticed something unusual. A black SUV parked near the highway far below. Probably nothing. Tourists came through occasionally. Hunters, too. Still, something about it felt strange. The vehicle remained parked long after it should have moved. Ethan watched for several seconds, then forced himself to look away. Hypervigilance was part of PTSD. His therapist used to remind him of that. Not every parked vehicle was a threat. Not every stranger was watching. Not every shadow concealed danger. Sometimes a black SUV was simply a black SUV. By the time they reached the truck, the sun hung high over the valley. Titan jumped into the passenger seat. Ethan climbed behind the wheel. For a moment, he simply sat there, watching the mountains, listening to the quiet. The loneliness returned. It always did. But today felt slightly different. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the strange feeling Titan had sensed on the ridge. Maybe it was the distant SUV. Maybe it was nothing at all. Yet deep inside, a faint sensation lingered. The feeling that something was changing. The feeling that after years of drifting through life unseen, forgotten, and alone, the mountains were about to show him something he had never expected to find. And Titan, as always, would be the first to know. Neither of them could imagine that before another sunrise arrived, a giant stone hidden deep within those mountains would begin unraveling a mystery buried for 40 years. A mystery tied to Ethan's father, his lost ranch, and a truth powerful enough to change everything he thought he knew about his life. The mountains waited, silent, patient, watching. And somewhere beyond the snow-covered ridges, a secret was waiting for a homeless Navy SEAL and the loyal dog who refused to leave his side. The next morning arrived colder than the last. A hard frost covered the windshield of Ethan Walker's pickup truck, turning the glass white beneath the pale light of dawn. Inside the cab, Titan was already awake. The German Shepherd sat upright in the passenger seat, staring through the frosted window toward the mountains. Alert, focused, waiting. Ethan noticed it immediately. Over the years, he had learned to trust Titan's instincts more than his own. The dog rarely became interested in nothing. "What's got your attention this morning?" Ethan asked. Titan didn't move. His ears remained pointed forward. Ethan followed his gaze toward the distant ridgeline. Nothing seemed unusual, just endless pine forests and snow-covered slopes. Still, something felt different. The same strange feeling he'd carried home the day before returned. A faint sensation that the mountains were holding their breath. Ethan shook off the thought. Maybe it was lack of sleep. Maybe it was another symptom of PTSD. After all these years, he still struggled to separate instinct from anxiety. He climbed out of the truck and stretched. The morning air burned his lungs. The Bitterroot Mountains stood silent beneath a sky painted in soft shades of pink and blue. Titan jumped down beside him. Normally, the dog would wait while Ethan finished his coffee. Today, he immediately started toward the trail. Fast, purposeful, almost impatient. "Easy there." Titan glanced back once, then continued. Ethan frowned. That wasn't normal. Still, he grabbed his backpack and followed. The forest felt unusually quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Even the wind seemed absent. Only the crunch of snow beneath boots and paws broke the silence. For nearly an hour they climbed through thick timber. The trail twisted between towering pines and granite outcroppings. Sunlight slowly spilled across the mountainside. Long shadows stretched across untouched snow. Titan remained far more focused than usual. He barely stopped to investigate scents, barely wandered from the trail. It was as if he already knew exactly where he wanted to go. Twice Ethan called him back. Twice Titan returned only briefly before moving ahead again. The behavior reminded Ethan of deployment days, tracking days, mission days. The realization made him uneasy. Around mid-morning they reached an old logging road abandoned decades earlier. Most locals avoided the area. Heavy winter storms had washed out sections of the road years ago. Nature had slowly reclaimed what remained. Tall pines crowded both sides. Snow drifted across broken gravel. The place felt forgotten. Titan suddenly stopped. Every muscle in his body went rigid. Ethan froze. Years of training took over instantly. The dog wasn't barking. Not yet. He was staring, focused on something ahead, something hidden beyond the trees. "What is it, buddy?" Titan took 3 cautious steps forward. Then he barked. Once, twice, then again, sharp, urgent, nothing like his usual warning bark. Ethan moved carefully through the trees. Branches scraped against his jacket. Snow fell from overhead limbs. The terrain rose gently. Then he saw it, and stopped cold. A massive stone formation towered before him, at least 20 feet high, maybe more. The thing looked completely out of place, like a giant had dropped it into the forest. Ethan stared in disbelief. He had spent years hiking these mountains. Years. There was no way he could have missed something this enormous. Yet he had never seen it before. Not once. The stone was split down the middle. Two towering slabs leaned apart from one another. Between them ran a narrow gap swallowed by darkness. Titan barked again, then sprinted toward it. "Titan!" The dog ignored him. Ethan hurried after him. His boots slipped on packed snow as he approached the formation. The closer he got, the stranger it looked. The stone surface appeared weathered, ancient, covered in moss and lichen despite the winter cold. The crack running through its center looked almost deliberate. Too straight. Too perfect. Titan circled the base of the formation, sniffing furiously. His tail moved stiffly. His body language balanced between excitement and caution. Then the dog disappeared into the shadow between the stones. For a moment, Ethan couldn't see him. "Titan!" A bark echoed from inside. The sound seemed deeper than it should have, as if it traveled through a hollow space beneath the mountain. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. Curiosity warred with common sense. The gap between the stones was narrow but passable. A cold draft flowed from within, not the natural breeze of winter. This felt different, like air rising from underground. Ethan stepped closer. The darkness beyond stretched farther than expected, farther than a simple crack should allow. His military instincts immediately noticed something else. Footing. The ground inside wasn't natural. It looked worn, flattened, almost shaped, as though people had walked there long ago. Titan barked again, more urgently. Ethan removed the flashlight from his backpack. The beam sliced into the darkness. At first he saw only rock, then something unexpected. Stone walls, smooth stone walls, not formed by nature, carved. His pulse jumped. The narrow passage continued deeper into the mountain, far deeper. The beam revealed what looked unmistakably like steps descending into darkness. Well, I'll be damned. Titan emerged briefly from the shadows and looked back at him, waiting, almost inviting him to follow. Ethan stood frozen. A lifetime of experience told him something wasn't right. Hidden tunnels didn't simply appear in remote Montana mountains, especially not beneath giant stones nobody knew existed. Yet there it was, real, impossible, waiting. The former SEAL studied the entrance carefully. No recent tire tracks, no footprints, no signs of modern activity. The snow around the formation appeared untouched except for their own tracks. Whoever built this place had done so long ago. Very long ago. A chill crawled across the back of his neck. The same feeling he used to get before missions went sideways, before danger revealed itself, before something hidden became visible. Titan returned to his side. The dog pressed lightly against Ethan's leg. Not fearful, not nervous, certain. Ethan looked down at him. "You really want me to see this, don't you?" Titan stared back. The answer was obvious. For a long moment, neither moved. The forest around them remained silent. The mountain seemed to be watching, waiting. Then Ethan switched on the flashlight again. His curiosity finally overcame caution. One careful step carried him into the darkness, then another. The temperature dropped immediately. Cold stone surrounded him. The outside world vanished behind him. Titan moved ahead through the tunnel. The beam illuminated carved walls that disappeared into the earth. The passage extended much farther than Ethan expected. Farther than it should. Each step downward deepened the mystery. Who built this place? Why hide it beneath a giant stone? And why had Titan led him here? The answers waited somewhere below. But even Ethan's years of military experience couldn't prepare him for what he was about to find. Because hidden in the darkness beneath the mountain was a name he hadn't seen in decades. a name connected to the greatest loss of his life. And the moment he saw it, everything he believed about his past would begin to unravel. The tunnel descended deeper beneath the mountain. Ethan Walker moved carefully, flashlight raised, every instinct sharpened by decades of training. Titan stayed close. The German shepherd's paws made almost no sound against the stone floor. Only the faint echo of their movement accompanied them through the darkness. The air felt strange, still, cold, ancient. The tunnel walls appeared smoother the farther they went. This wasn't a natural cave. Someone had built it. Someone with skill. Someone who had wanted this place hidden. The passage finally opened into a large underground chamber. Ethan stopped. His breath caught. The flashlight beam swept across the room. Dust floated through the air like drifting snow. The chamber was enormous, at least 50 feet across. Stone pillars supported the ceiling overhead. Rusted metal shelves lined the walls. Wooden crates sat stacked in forgotten corners. Old filing cabinets stood beneath thick layers of dust. The entire place looked frozen in time, as if nobody had entered for decades. Titan slowly walked forward. His ears remained alert. His nose worked constantly. Searching, examining, trying to understand. Ethan moved deeper into the chamber. The beam crossed faded military markings painted on several crates. His pulse quickened. The symbols looked familiar. Government inventory codes, military surplus designations. Nothing classified. Nothing illegal. Yet they clearly didn't belong in a hidden chamber beneath a Montana mountain. What is this place? The question echoed softly around the room. No answer came. Only silence. The flashlight passed across one wall. Ethan froze. His entire body locked in place. A metal plaque had been bolted directly into the stone. Years of dust covered it. Slowly, almost afraid to touch it, Ethan stepped closer. He brushed away the dirt with his sleeve. Letters emerged. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The name stared back at him. Samuel Walker. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. For several seconds he simply stared, unable to move, unable to breathe. Samuel Walker. His father. The man who was supposed to have died 40 years ago. The man whose funeral Ethan had attended. The man buried beneath a weathered headstone in Pine Hollow Cemetery. A flood of memories rushed through him. Fishing trips, horseback rides, summer evenings on the ranch. His father's laugh, his father's voice. Then came the worst memory. The sheriff's car arriving, the terrible news, the hunting accident, the funeral. The empty chair at every family gathering afterward. Ethan swallowed hard. His throat tightened. What were you doing here, Dad? Titan approached quietly and pressed against his leg. The simple gesture grounded him, kept him present. Ethan reached down and rested a hand on the dog's head. For a moment, neither moved. Then Ethan forced himself to continue. Questions needed answers. The chamber held them. Somewhere. The flashlight moved across nearby shelves. Most contained rotted paperwork, old tools, broken equipment. Nothing remarkable. Then he found a stack of framed photographs, carefully wrapped in faded cloth. Ethan removed the top frame. Dust coated the glass. He wiped it clean. His stomach dropped. The photograph showed 6 men standing together outside a building. One of them was Samuel Walker. Younger, smiling, very much alive. Ethan stared in disbelief. The picture couldn't have been taken shortly before his father's death. The date written on the back proved it. 3 months before the accident. And Samuel wasn't alone. Several men stood beside him. Men in expensive suits. Men who clearly weren't ranchers. Men who looked like businessmen. Powerful businessmen. Ethan examined each face carefully. Most meant nothing to him. One seemed vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place him. Not yet. More photographs followed. Dozens. Samuel shaking hands with local officials. Samuel standing beside survey teams. Samuel studying maps spread across tables. Samuel inspecting mountain land. The deeper Ethan looked, the stranger the collection became. His father appeared involved in something significant, something far beyond ordinary ranch work. Titan suddenly growled, low, deep, focused. Ethan immediately looked up. The dog stood near the far side of the chamber, staring at a pile of collapsed debris. "What is it?" Titan barked once, then pawed at the ground. Ethan hurried over. Broken wooden boards covered part of the floor. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the flashlight caught a glint of metal. A corner, partially hidden. Ethan knelt, carefully removing debris. Dust filled the air. The object slowly emerged. A steel box. Heavy. Military grade. Locked. Titan barked again. Excited. Persistent. The same way he used to signal discoveries during search operations. Good boy. Ethan brushed away dirt. The box appeared old, very old, yet someone had gone to considerable effort to hide it. That alone made it important. He checked the lock. Rust covered most of it. Years of neglect had weakened the mechanism. Ethan searched nearby shelves. After several minutes, he located a rusted pry bar. The lock resisted, then snapped. The sound echoed through the chamber. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside lay dozens of folders, maps, documents, photographs, everything carefully sealed against moisture. Ethan removed the top file. Property surveys, land records, legal documents. Most dated back decades. Many carried official county stamps. Others featured signatures. One signature appeared repeatedly. Samuel Walker. Ethan frowned. The documents made little sense. Not yet. But one thing was immediately obvious. His father had been deeply involved in something connected to land ownership throughout the Bitterroot Valley. Far more involved than Ethan had ever known. Titan suddenly became tense. The dog's head snapped toward the tunnel entrance. Every muscle stiffened. Listening, watching. Ethan's military instincts immediately activated. He turned off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Both man and dog stood perfectly still, listening, waiting. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then silence returned. Maybe an animal outside. Maybe falling rock. Maybe nothing. Still, the interruption reminded Ethan of something important. He wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody knew he had found this place. Or at least he hoped nobody knew. He switched the flashlight back on. The steel box remained open. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Why had his father hidden these files? Why store them beneath a mountain? Why place his name on the wall? And why had nobody ever mentioned any of this? Ethan looked back at Samuel's plaque. The beam illuminated the metal surface. Something beneath the name caught his attention. Small letters, almost invisible beneath decades of dust. He wiped the plaque clean. A second line appeared. His pulse accelerated again. The inscription read, "For those who seek the truth," and then stared. A chill moved through him. The words felt intentional, personal, as if his father had known someone would eventually stand here, reading them, looking for answers, looking for truth. Titan sat beside him, watching, waiting. The old soldier looked around the chamber one more time. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a message, a warning, maybe even a confession. And somehow his father had expected it to be found. The realization sent another wave of unease through him. Because if Samuel Walker had gone to such lengths to hide these documents, Then whatever he had discovered before his death must have been important enough to destroy lives, important enough to bury beneath a mountain, important enough to stay hidden for 40 years. Ethan closed the steel box. His decision was made. He would take the documents, study them, learn the truth, whatever that truth turned out to be. But deep down, another thought had already begun to form. A thought far more troubling. What if his father's death had never been an accident at all? And if that was true, who had spent 40 years making sure nobody asked questions? The drive back to Pine Hollow felt longer than usual. Snow drifted across the two-lane highway as Ethan Walker guided his aging pickup through the winding mountain roads. Beside him, Titan sat alert in the passenger seat. The steel box rested on the floor between them. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced down at it, as if afraid it might disappear, or prove to be a dream. The hidden chamber, his father's name, the photographs, the documents. None of it made sense. Yet all of it was real. Outside, clouds rolled over the Bitterroot Mountains, dark and heavy. A storm was coming. By the time Ethan reached town, the first snowflakes had begun to fall. Pine Hollow looked exactly as it always did, a small Montana community surrounded by wilderness. The diner stood near Main Street, a gas station across the road, a feed store, a church, a handful of businesses trying to survive another long winter. Ordinary, peaceful. But today, Ethan saw it differently. For the first time in years, he wondered what secrets might be hiding beneath the town's quiet surface. How many people had known Samuel Walker? How many remembered him? How many had forgotten? Ethan parked behind the diner. He trusted only a few people in town. One of them owned the diner, Frank Dawson. 72 years old, former rancher, permanent coffee cup in hand. A man who somehow knew everyone's business without ever seeming nosy. Frank looked up as Ethan entered. "Morning, Walker." "Morning." Frank studied him for a second. Something happened. It wasn't a question. Ethan almost smiled. Frank had always been good at reading people. "That obvious? You look like a man who found a ghost." The words hit closer than Frank realized. Ethan sat down at a corner booth. Titan settled beside him. Several locals greeted Ethan politely. Most knew him. Few truly knew his story. Frank brought coffee without asking. The old diner owner lowered his voice. "What's going on?" For a moment, Ethan considered telling him everything, then thought better of it. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone remained, at least until he understood what he was dealing with. Instead, he asked a question. "You remember my father?" Frank nodded slowly. "Samuel Walker." A shadow crossed his face. "Good man. You ever hear him talk about mountain property surveys?" Frank frowned. "No." "Government officials? Land deals?" "No." The answer came too quickly, too confidently, not suspicious, just honest. Frank genuinely seemed confused. That alone told Ethan something important. Whatever Samuel had been involved with, he had kept it quiet. Very quiet. Ethan finished his coffee and returned to the truck. Snow continued falling. The storm was strengthening. He drove toward the edge of town where a small legal office sat between a pharmacy and an insurance agency. The sign read, "Claire Bennett." Attorney at law, the name stirred old memories. Claire Bennett had grown up in Pine Hollow, a few years younger than Ethan. She'd known his family, known his father, known the ranch. If anyone might help him understand the documents, it was her. The office bell chimed as Ethan entered. Claire looked up from her desk. For a moment, surprise filled her face. Then recognition. "Ethan?" He nodded. "It's been a while. More than a while." She stood and smiled warmly, The years had added silver strands to her hair, but little else. She still carried the calm confidence Ethan remembered. "What can I do for you?" Ethan placed several folders from the steel box on her desk. Claire's smile faded. She immediately recognized the seriousness in his expression. Within minutes, papers covered the conference table. Property records, survey maps, legal filings, transfer documents. Claire studied them carefully. The room grew quiet except for the sound of pages turning. Outside, snow tapped against the windows. Finally, she looked up. Her expression had changed. "What exactly is this? That's what I'm trying to figure out." Claire examined another page, then another. A crease formed between her eyes. "This is strange." "How strange?" "Very." She pointed to several signatures. "These transfers involve land all over the valley." Ethan leaned forward. "What kind of land?" "Thousands of acres." His stomach tightened. "Owned by who?" Claire continued reading. "The Walker family." The words landed heavily. "What?" She nodded. "Your family owned much more land than the ranch itself." Ethan stared. "No, that's impossible." Claire slid several maps across the table. Red boundary lines stretched across large portions of the surrounding mountains. Timberland, grazing land, creek access, mineral rights. The scale shocked him. "These records suggest your grandfather acquired several parcels over decades." Ethan shook his head. "My father never mentioned any of this. Maybe he planned to." Claire tapped one document. "These transfers stop abruptly around the year he died." Silence settled between them. Neither needed to say it. The timing was impossible to ignore. A sudden ringing phone broke the tension. Claire answered briefly. When she returned, her expression remained troubled. "Ethan." "What?" "I think your father was investigating something." The statement hung in the room. "What kind of something?" Claire opened another folder. Property transfers, foreclosures, ownership changes. Most appeared routine, until she found several pages that clearly weren't. This land changed hands repeatedly. She pointed at the records. 2 repeatedly. Ethan studied the paperwork. "What does that mean?" "It means someone was moving property around on paper." "Why?" Claire leaned back. "Usually to hide something." The answer sent a chill through him. Titan suddenly lifted his head. His ears pointed toward the window. The dog stood, watching. Ethan followed his gaze. Across the street sat a black SUV. His stomach tightened. The same model he had seen near the highway yesterday. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. The vehicle remained parked. Engine running. Dark windows. Watching the office. Titan emitted a low growl. Claire noticed. "What is it?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept staring at the SUV. A familiar sensation crawled through him. The feeling he used to get before an operation turned dangerous. Hypervigilance. His therapist called it that, but military instincts called it survival. After several minutes, the SUV drove away, yet the uneasy feeling remained. Claire returned to the paperwork. The deeper she looked, the more concerned she became. Finally, she found something that made her freeze. "Ethan." He looked up. "You need to see this." She slid a document across the table. An official county filing, dated 6 months before Samuel Walker's death. At the bottom appeared Samuel's signature, except something felt wrong. Even Ethan could see it. The handwriting didn't match. Not exactly. Claire studied it closely, then looked at him. "I've handled forgery cases. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What are you saying?" She met his eyes. "I'm saying I don't think your father signed this." Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the truth began taking shape. Not enough to see clearly. Not yet. But enough to recognize. Something had happened 40 years ago. Something involving land, money, power, and perhaps murder. Titan moved closer to Ethan. The old dog pressed against his leg, grounding him, steadying him, the way he always did. Claire gathered the documents carefully. "Leave these with me. You think they're important?" She looked directly at him. "I think someone went to a lot of trouble to hide them." Ethan glanced toward the window, toward the street, toward the place where the SUV had been. The storm outside intensified. Snow swallowed the town in white. And somewhere beyond the falling snow, someone might already know he had opened a door that had remained closed for 40 years. A door leading toward answers, toward his father, toward the truth. And if that truth threatened powerful people, then Ethan Walker and Titan had just become part of a game far bigger than either of them realized. The storm arrived in full force that night. Snow hammered the roof of Ethan's pickup truck, while icy wind rattled the windows. Most people in Pine Hollow were asleep. Ethan wasn't. Sleep rarely came easy. Tonight it seemed impossible. He sat behind the steering wheel with the blanket draped across his shoulders, watching snow swirl beneath the yellow glow of a distant street lamp. Titan lay across the bench seat. The German Shepherd appeared relaxed. But Ethan knew better. Even resting, Titan was always listening, always alert. The steel box sat beneath a tarp behind the seat. Claire had kept most of the documents for further review, but Ethan had retained several photographs and copies. Enough to study. Enough to keep his mind racing. The photograph of Samuel Walker remained in his hands. His father looked confident, determined, alive. Nothing about the image suggested a man only months away from a fatal hunting accident. The more Ethan stared at it, the less he believed the official story. Sometime after midnight, Titan's head suddenly lifted. Instantly. No hesitation. The dog's ears locked forward. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Ethan straightened. Every trace of exhaustion vanished. "What is it?" Titan moved toward the window, growling harder. Outside, the storm continued. Snow reduced visibility to almost nothing. At first, Ethan saw only darkness, then movement, a shadow, someone walking between parked vehicles, slowly, carefully. His pulse accelerated. The figure disappeared, then reappeared, closer. The person wasn't seeking shelter from the storm. They were searching, watching. Ethan quietly reached for the flashlight beside him. Titan's growl deepened. The shadow stopped. For several long seconds, neither moved. Then headlights flashed briefly farther down the road. A vehicle, waiting. The figure immediately turned and disappeared into the darkness. Gone. Just like that. Titan barked sharply. Once. Twice. Then silence returned. Ethan remained motionless, watching, listening. The storm eventually swallowed every trace of activity, but he knew what he had seen. Someone had been there. Someone interested in him. The realization followed him into dawn. The next morning, Pine Hollow looked buried beneath fresh snow. The town moved slowly. Residents cleared driveways. Plows pushed snow from roads. Life continued as normal, at least on the surface. Ethan entered the diner shortly after sunrise. The warmth hit him immediately. Coffee, bacon, and fresh biscuits filled the air. The familiar smell should have been comforting. Instead, he found himself scanning every face in the room. Old habits, old instincts. Frank Dawson noticed. "You look worse than yesterday." Ethan slid into a booth. Didn't sleep much. Frank poured coffee. You ever do? Ethan managed a faint smile. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. Morning, Ethan. He looked up. Maggie Turner, owner of the diner, a widow in her late 60s who had known the Walker family for decades. She usually carried herself with cheerful energy. Today, she seemed uneasy. Can I talk to you for a second? Something in her tone immediately caught his attention. Sure. She glanced around before sitting opposite him. 2 men were here yesterday. Ethan's stomach tightened. What men? Didn't recognize them. Her voice lowered. They asked about you. Titan looked up instantly, as if sensing the shift. Ethan kept his expression neutral. What did they want? They asked where you stay. A cold feeling settled into his chest. What did you tell them? Nothing. She shook her head firmly. I told them that wasn't any of my business. Ethan nodded. Thank you. Maggie hesitated. They weren't locals. How do you know? She glanced toward the window. Because locals don't look at people that way. The statement lingered. Ethan understood exactly what she meant. Predators recognized other predators. The conversation ended when customers entered the diner, but the warning remained. 2 strangers, asking questions, searching for him. Outside, the snow reflected bright winter sunlight, yet Ethan felt a growing darkness surrounding the mystery. Titan remained unusually alert throughout the day. Every sound, every passing vehicle, every stranger. The dog noticed everything. By late afternoon, Ethan returned to the Forest Service Road where he normally parked. The mountains stood silent beneath a clear sky. Beautiful, deceptively peaceful. For a few hours, nothing happened. Then evening came, and with it, confirmation. Titan woke Ethan just after midnight, not with barking, with urgency. The dog shoved his nose against Ethan's shoulder, hard, repeatedly. Ethan opened his eyes instantly. Titan stood rigid, staring toward the rear window. A low growl filled the cab. Someone was outside. The former SEAL remained still, listening. Footsteps. Soft. Careful. Moving around the truck. Not one person. More than one. Titan's growl intensified. Ethan slowly reached beneath the seat. His flashlight rested there. Nothing more. He wasn't looking for a confrontation. Only information. The footsteps stopped. Then came the sound of metal. Someone testing the truck door. Slowly. Quietly. Titan exploded. The German Shepherd launched against the window with a thunderous bark. The sudden violence shattered the silence. Outside, a curse echoed through the darkness. Footsteps scrambled across the snow. Running. Ethan grabbed the flashlight and threw open the door. The beam cut across the night. 2 figures sprinted toward the tree line. Faces hidden. Dark clothing. Within seconds, they vanished into the forest. A vehicle engine roared somewhere beyond the trees. Headlights flashed briefly, then disappeared. Gone. Titan continued barking. Protective. Furious. Ready to pursue. Ethan knelt beside him. It's okay. The dog remained tense, watching the darkness long after the intruders had fled. Ethan examined the truck. Fresh footprints surrounded it. Someone had circled the vehicle repeatedly. Someone had specifically checked the rear door. The door closest to the steel box. His blood ran cold. This wasn't random. They hadn't come looking for money or supplies. They knew something. The realization hit him harder than expected. Someone knew he had found the chamber. Someone knew he had taken documents. And someone wanted them back. By dawn, Ethan was already driving toward Claire Bennett's office. The moment she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. What happened? He told her everything. The SUV, the questions, the strangers, the attempted break-in. Claire listened carefully. Her expression grew increasingly serious. When he finished, she opened one of the files she had been studying. I found something. Ethan sat forward. What? She slid a page across the desk. A property transfer. Another forged signature. Another suspicious transaction. But this one carried an unfamiliar company name. Silver Ridge Development. The company no longer existed, at least officially. Claire tapped the page. This company appears throughout the records. What does it do? That's the problem. She looked directly at him. I can't find any evidence it ever did anything. The room fell silent. Fake companies, forged signatures, hidden documents, strangers asking questions, a break-in. The pieces were beginning to connect. Not clearly, not yet, but enough to reveal a pattern. Someone had spent decades protecting a secret, and now they knew Ethan Walker had started digging. Outside the office window, a black SUV rolled slowly down Main Street. Neither Ethan nor Claire noticed it, but Titan did. The German Shepherd stood, watching. His eyes never left the vehicle, not until it disappeared around the corner. Somewhere beyond Pine Hollow, powerful people were paying attention. The secret hidden beneath the mountain was no longer forgotten, and whoever had protected it for 40 years had finally realized that a homeless Navy SEAL and his loyal dog were getting dangerously close to the truth. For the next 3 days, Ethan Walker barely slept. The mystery consumed him. Every document Claire Bennett uncovered raised new questions. Every answer revealed a larger problem hiding beneath it. Outside, winter tightened its grip on western Montana. Snow covered rooftops. Ice lined the roads. The Bitterroot Mountains stood silent beneath steel-gray skies. Yet beneath that calm surface, something was moving. Something old. Something dangerous. Claire's office became their headquarters. Stacks of property records covered every available table. Survey maps hung from walls. County filings filled cardboard boxes. Titan spent most of his time lying beside Ethan's chair, watching everything. The German Shepherd had become unusually protective. He tracked every visitor, every sound, every movement outside the office, almost as if he understood the danger before the humans did. Late one afternoon, Claire finally pushed away from the table. Her eyes looked exhausted. She had been studying records for nearly 10 hours. I found it. Ethan immediately sat up. What? Claire slowly turned a file toward him. The cover contained a familiar address. His old ranch. Walker Ridge Ranch. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. The sight of the name brought back memories he spent years trying to bury. The ranch had once been everything. The house, the horses, the rolling fields stretching beneath the mountains. The place where his daughter Emily learned to ride. The place where family barbecues filled summer evenings with laughter. The place where his life had still made sense, before everything fell apart. Claire opened the file. What you're about to see won't be easy. Ethan nodded. Show me. The first pages appeared ordinary. Loan records, tax filings, mortgage paperwork. Then Claire pointed toward several signatures. Look closely. Ethan examined them. His expression hardened. The signatures looked familiar. Too familiar. One belonged to him, or at least it was supposed to. The problem was obvious. He had never signed those papers. Never. His military training taught him attention to detail. He knew his own signature. The one on the document was a forgery. A good one, but still fake. His pulse quickened. What is this? Claire slid another document across the table. Then another. then another. Each carried suspicious signatures, altered dates, questionable approvals. By the time Ethan finished reviewing them, his hands had curled into fists. Someone had systematically stolen his ranch, not through legal foreclosure, not through missed payments, through fraud. The realization hit him like a punch. Years of shame suddenly looked different. For years he had blamed himself, blamed his PTSD, blamed his financial struggles, blamed every mistake he'd ever made. Now another possibility emerged. What if he had never truly lost the ranch at all? What if someone had taken it? Claire answered the question quietly. They did. Silence filled the room. Titan lifted his head, watching Ethan carefully. The old soldier stared at the documents. The emotions came in waves. Shock, anger, disbelief. Then something deeper. Betrayal. The ranch wasn't just property. It was family history. Generations of work. Generations of memories. Someone had stolen all of it, and somehow convinced him the loss was his own fault. Claire continued turning pages. The ranch wasn't the only target. Ethan looked up. What do you mean? She pointed toward a large survey map. Colored sections stretched across the Bitterroot Valley. Thousands of acres, forests, creeks, mountain land, timber rights, mineral rights. The scale was enormous. Claire tapped several marked parcels. These properties changed ownership around the same time. Ethan studied the map. Many names appeared familiar. Families he remembered from childhood. Old ranching families. Local landowners. People who had gradually disappeared from the valley over the years. What happened to them? Claire's expression darkened. Most lost their land. A cold feeling settled in Ethan's chest. The pattern was impossible to ignore. One family might be misfortune. Two families might be coincidence. Dozens of families. That was something else entirely. Someone had been buying the valley piece by piece, quietly, patiently, for decades. Claire opened another folder. This one contained records from a company Ethan had never heard of. Silver Ridge Development, the same company she had mentioned earlier. The deeper she investigated, the stranger it became. The company officially no longer existed, yet its fingerprints appeared everywhere. Land transfers, legal disputes, property acquisitions, hidden partnerships, fake corporations. The company seemed to vanish and reappear under different names. Like a ghost moving through county records, always present, never visible. Ethan leaned back. His mind raced. And suddenly, something clicked. His father, Samuel Walker. The hidden chamber. The documents. The photographs. Samuel hadn't been collecting evidence by accident. He had been investigating something massive. Something worth hiding. Something worth dying for. The realization made Ethan's stomach tighten. What if my father discovered all of this? Claire looked at him. I think he did. The words hung heavily in the room. Outside, dusk settled across Pine Hollow. Streetlights flickered on. Snow drifted through the darkness. The town looked peaceful. Yet Ethan could no longer see it that way. The valley itself had become part of the mystery, a place built on hidden secrets and buried lies. Titan suddenly stood. The dog's ears pointed toward the window. Ethan immediately followed his gaze. Across the street sat another black SUV, not moving, not parked naturally, watching. The same model, the same dark windows, the same feeling. Titan growled softly. Claire turned. You've got to be kidding me. Neither spoke for several seconds. Eventually, the SUV pulled away, but the message was clear. Someone knew they were making progress. Someone wanted them to notice. That realization changed everything. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was real, personal, close. Claire gathered the documents into a secure box. "We need backups." Ethan nodded, already thinking the same thing. For the next hour, they scanned files, copied records, created digital archives, multiple copies, multiple locations. Neither trusted the situation anymore. By the time they finished, darkness had completely settled over Pine Hollow. Claire locked the office. Snow crunched beneath their feet as they stepped outside. The town felt unusually quiet, almost too quiet. Titan remained pressed close to Ethan's side, watching, listening, protecting. As they reached the truck, Claire hesitated. "Ethan." He turned. "If this goes where I think it goes." She paused. "Your father may have uncovered something worth millions." Ethan frowned. "Millions?" Claire nodded. "Possibly hundreds of millions." The number felt absurd. Yet looking back at the maps, the land, the mineral rights, and the scale of the operation, it suddenly seemed possible. The mountains surrounding Pine Hollow weren't just beautiful. They were valuable, extremely valuable. And if powerful people had spent decades stealing land, then the Walker Ranch had never been the real prize. It had only been one piece of a much larger plan. Ethan climbed into the truck. Titan settled beside him. The engine started. Headlights illuminated the falling snow. As he pulled away, Ethan glanced toward the mountains. Somewhere beyond those ridges stood the giant stone, the hidden chamber, the place where Samuel Walker had left his trail. For the first time, Ethan understood why his father had hidden the evidence. Because the conspiracy wasn't small. It wasn't local. And it certainly wasn't over. Whoever had stolen the valley was still out there, still powerful, still watching. And sooner or later, they were going to realize Ethan Walker wasn't going to stop digging. The realization followed him for the next several days. Everywhere he went, the feeling remained. At the gas station, at the diner, on the mountain trails, even sitting alone inside his truck at night. Someone was paying attention. The strange part wasn't the fear. Ethan Walker had lived with fear before. Combat taught him how to function under pressure. What bothered him was uncertainty. An enemy you could see was one thing. An enemy hiding behind money, lawyers, and decades of secrets was something else entirely. By Friday morning, another storm was approaching the Bitterroots. Dark clouds rolled over the peaks. Wind swept through the valley. Titan stood beside the truck while Ethan tightened the straps on his backpack. The German shepherd seemed unusually alert. His eyes constantly scanned the tree line. "You feel it too, don't you?" Titan looked up. The dog gave a short bark. Ethan nodded. He had made a decision. The chamber held answers. The documents Claire discovered proved that. If there was more evidence hidden beneath the mountain, he needed to find it before someone else did, before the people watching him decided to act. The trail climbed steadily into the wilderness. Snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots. Titan ranged ahead, checking the path before circling back. The mountains felt different now, less peaceful, more watchful. Every distant sound seemed amplified. Every shadow demanded attention. Hours passed. The weather worsened. Wind pushed snow through the pines. Visibility gradually shrank. By early afternoon, they reached the area near the giant stone. Ethan stopped. Something immediately felt wrong. Titan sensed it too. The dog's posture changed. Rigid. Focused. Alert. Ethan slowly scanned the area. Nothing moved. No footprints. No vehicles. No obvious signs of human presence. Yet the feeling remained. Strong. Persistent. The old seal trusted instincts earned over decades, and his instincts were screaming. "We're not alone," Titan growled softly. The sound barely rose above the wind. Ethan changed direction. Instead of heading directly toward the hidden chamber, he moved along a secondary trail that crossed an old wooden bridge spanning a frozen creek. The bridge had been built decades earlier for logging operations. Time had weathered the wood gray. Snow covered most of its surface. The structure looked abandoned. Halfway across, Titan suddenly stopped, every muscle locked. His ears snapped forward. The growl returned, louder this time. Then Ethan heard it, a faint sound. Not natural. A click. Metal against wood. Someone shifting position. His pulse accelerated instantly. Ambush. Years of training took over. Ethan dropped low. "Titan!" The German Shepherd moved immediately. Not away. Toward him. Toward protection. Toward danger. Movement exploded from the trees. Several dark figures emerged from cover along the creek banks. Faces hidden. Heavy winter clothing. Professional posture. Not hunters. Not hikers. The men advanced with deliberate confidence. The kind of confidence that came from planning, from preparation, from knowing exactly where their target would appear. One voice carried through the wind. "Mr. Walker." Ethan remained crouched, watching, calculating. The speaker stood 20 yards away. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." There it was. Confirmation. This was about the chamber, the documents, the truth. Ethan said nothing. The man took another step. "We don't want trouble." Ethan almost laughed. Several strangers ambushing him on a mountain bridge while claiming they didn't want trouble. The statement was absurd. Titan's growl deepened. The dog positioned himself between Ethan and the approaching men. Protective, unwavering. The speaker continued. "Hand over the materials." Ethan's eyes moved carefully between the figures. 3 visible, possibly more hidden. Bad odds, but not impossible. The problem wasn't himself. The problem was Titan. Protecting the dog mattered more than protecting evidence, more than protecting pride. The wind suddenly shifted. One of the men moved unexpectedly. Fast. Too fast. The situation changed in an instant. Titan reacted first, always first. The German Shepherd launched forward, not attacking, intercepting, protecting. Chaos erupted. Voices shouted. Snow exploded beneath running feet. Ethan moved automatically. Years of military training compressing time itself. He grabbed Titan's harness, pulled, turned. Then came a sharp crack that echoed through the canyon. The sound froze everything. For a fraction of a second, silence followed. Then Titan stumbled. Ethan's heart stopped. The German Shepherd fell against him. A dark stain spread across the dog's shoulder. No, the word escaped before Ethan realized he had spoken. Titan tried to stand, tried to keep moving, but pain flashed across his face. The old soldier dropped beside him. His hands immediately searched the wound. Blood. Not catastrophic, but serious. Far too serious. Rage surged through Ethan. Not fear, not panic. Rage. He could accept danger directed at himself, but Titan, never. The dog had spent years protecting him, saving him, remaining loyal when everything else fell apart. Seeing Titan injured broke something deep inside him. The men seemed startled, as if they had never expected the situation to unfold this way, as if they had underestimated the bond between man and dog. Big mistake. Ethan moved, fast, decisive, using the confusion to his advantage. The storm intensified around them, wind and snow reducing visibility, turning the mountain into a maze. Exactly the kind of environment he understood. Exactly the kind of terrain that favored experience over numbers. He lifted Titan. The dog was heavy, but adrenaline ignored such details. You stay with me." Titan looked up. Pain filled his eyes, yet his tail moved once. Still protecting, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Ethan retreated into the trees, moving fast, using terrain, using cover, using every survival skill he possessed. Behind them, voices echoed through the storm. The men were searching, but the mountain was vast, and Ethan knew routes no outsider could follow easily. For over an hour, he pushed deeper into the wilderness. Snow covered tracks almost as quickly as they formed. The storm became an ally, a shield, a barrier. Finally, as daylight began fading, Ethan reached a rocky overlook hidden among thick pines. Shelter. Temporary. But enough. He carefully lowered Titan onto a blanket. The dog's breathing remained steady. That alone brought relief. Ethan examined the wound again. The injury crossed the shoulder. Painful. Serious. But survivable. Thank God. The realization hit him so hard that he nearly collapsed. For several long seconds, he simply sat beside the dog, one hand resting on Titan's neck. The storm roared around them. Snow swept through the trees, yet neither man nor dog seemed to notice. Easiest mission in the world. His voice cracked. You had one job. Titan lifted his head weakly, licked Ethan's hand. The gesture nearly broke him, because even injured, even exhausted, the dog was still trying to comfort him, not the other way around. Night settled over the mountains. The temperature dropped rapidly. Ethan wrapped Titan in every spare layer he carried. The dog drifted in and out of sleep. Each time Ethan checked his breathing, checked the wound, checked again. Hours passed. The mountain remained silent. The men who had ambushed them were gone, for now. But the attack changed everything. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This wasn't surveillance. This wasn't a warning. Someone wanted the evidence badly enough to send people into the mountains. Someone powerful. Someone desperate. And for the first time since finding the hidden chamber, Ethan realized exactly how dangerous the truth might be. The storm howled through the darkness. Titan slept beside him, injured, alive. And Ethan made a silent promise. Whatever secret his father died protecting, whatever conspiracy had stolen his family's land, whatever powerful people stood behind it, he would uncover the truth. Because Titan had nearly paid for that truth with his life, and now there was no turning back. The storm raged through the Bitterroot Mountains all night. Wind screamed through the pines, snow buried trails. The wilderness disappeared beneath a swirling white curtain. Hidden among rocky outcroppings, Ethan Walker remained beside Titan. Neither slept much. Every few minutes, Ethan checked the dog's breathing, checked the bandage, checked again. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious. And Titan wasn't young anymore. Neither of them were. At 63, Ethan understood something most people didn't. Age wasn't measured in years. It was measured in scars. And both of them carried plenty. As dawn approached, the storm showed no sign of stopping. Ethan studied a map from memory. About 3 miles east stood an old hunting cabin. Few people knew it existed. His father had shown it to him decades earlier. A place built deep in the mountains. A place meant for emergencies. A place where they could disappear. Titan lifted his head when Ethan touched his harness. We need to move, partner. The German shepherd struggled to stand. Pain flashed across his face, but he stood anyway. That alone nearly broke Ethan's heart. Even wounded, even exhausted. Titan was still trying to do his job. The journey took hours. The storm turned every step into work. Snow reached their knees in places. Wind erased tracks behind them. At least that helped. Anyone searching would struggle to follow. Several times Ethan carried part of Titan's weight. The dog hated it. His pride remained intact, but necessity won. By mid-afternoon, the cabin finally appeared through the snowfall. Small, weathered, half hidden among dense pines. The structure looked abandoned, exactly as intended. Relief washed through Ethan. For the first time since the ambush, they had real shelter. The door groaned as he pushed it open. Cold air spilled out. Dust covered most surfaces, yet the cabin remained structurally sound. A wood stove stood in the corner. Simple furniture lined the walls. Old supplies remained stacked inside cabinets. The place felt frozen in time. Titan immediately collapsed near the stove. Exhaustion finally winning. Ethan got to work. Years of military survival training made routine easy. Firewood, heat, water, bandages. Within an hour, warmth slowly returned to the cabin. Orange firelight danced across wooden walls. Outside, the blizzard continued. Inside, a fragile sense of safety emerged. For the first time in days, Ethan could focus completely on Titan. He carefully removed the old bandage. The wound looked angry but stable. No signs of severe complications. Thank God. Titan watched him quietly. Trusting. Patient. The same way he always had. You scared me. The dog tilted his head. Ethan laughed softly despite everything. You really did. Titan's tail moved once against the floor. That small gesture felt like a miracle. As darkness settled outside, silence filled the cabin. Not true silence. The kind of silence that only exists in wilderness. The crackle of fire. The wind outside. The occasional creak of old wood. Simple sounds. Honest sounds. For most people, it would have felt peaceful. For Ethan, it became something else. Dangerous. Because quiet gave memories room to speak. And Ethan carried far too many memories. The first flashback arrived without warning. A helicopter. Dust. Gunfire. A young soldier screaming for a medic. Ethan blinked. The cabin returned, but only briefly. Another memory followed. A village overseas, smoke rising into the sky. The smell of burning fuel. The weight of responsibility. The impossible decisions. The faces that never truly left. He closed his eyes, tried controlling his breathing. Sometimes it worked. Tonight, it didn't. PTSD wasn't simply remembering. It was reliving. Your mind forgot the difference. The past became the present. Titan noticed immediately. The dog slowly pushed himself up despite the pain. He crossed the room, then rested his head on Ethan's knee. The contact grounded him, anchored him, brought him back, just like always. Years earlier, military therapists had explained it. Service dogs sensed changes in breathing, changes in posture, changes in stress. Titan had learned Ethan's invisible wounds better than anyone, sometimes better than Ethan himself. The trembling gradually stopped. The panic faded. The cabin returned. The storm returned. Reality returned. Ethan rested a hand on Titan's neck. You're still saving me. The dog closed his eyes. For a long moment, neither moved. The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow piled against the windows. Inside, two old warriors sat together. One human, one canine, both carrying scars, both refusing to quit. Later that evening, Ethan found an old photograph tucked inside a drawer. The picture showed him standing beside his father. Samuel Walker looked younger than Ethan remembered. Strong, confident, alive. The photograph triggered another wave of emotion. Not pain this time. Regret. 40 years. 40 years believing his father's death was an accident. 40 years accepting answers that now seemed impossible. What if Samuel had spent his final years trying to protect the truth? What if nobody listened? What if nobody helped? The thought haunted him. Titan shifted beside the stove, sleeping peacefully now. Ethan watched him. Then something occurred to him. Without Titan, none of this would have happened. The hidden chamber, the evidence, the photographs, the documents. Every step began with one loyal dog refusing to ignore something hidden beneath the mountain. The realization felt strangely emotional. For years, Ethan believed he was protecting Titan, providing food, shelter, purpose. But maybe the opposite was also true. Maybe Titan had been protecting him all along, protecting him from loneliness, from despair, from the darkness waiting inside PTSD, from giving up completely. The thought lingered long into the night. Near midnight, the storm finally began weakening. Wind softened, snowfall eased, the mountains settled into stillness. Ethan stepped outside briefly. The world looked transformed. Moonlight reflected across endless white snow. The forest shimmered beneath silver light. Beautiful, silent, ancient. For the first time since the ambush, he felt something unexpected. Hope. Not certainty, not safety. Just hope. The kind that appears after surviving something difficult. The kind that reminds you there is still a road forward. Inside the cabin, Titan slept beside the fire. His breathing was steady, his condition improving. The worst seemed behind them. Ethan sat down beside him. For a while he simply watched the flames, watched his friend, watched the shadows move across old wooden walls. Then he spoke quietly, almost as if talking to Samuel Walker. "I think I'm finally finding what you wanted me to find." The cabin offered no answer, only silence. Yet somehow it felt enough, because tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new discoveries. But tonight wasn't about conspiracies, or stolen land, or hidden enemies. Tonight was about survival, recovery, brotherhood, and the simple truth that one wounded German shepherd had once again given a broken man a reason to keep going. Outside, the storm finally passed. Inside, two old warriors rested beside the fire, unaware that the most important clue of all still waited hidden inside the steel box. A clue left behind by Samuel Walker himself, a message that would soon change everything. Morning arrived quietly in the mountains. Sunlight filtered through frost-covered pines. The storm had passed. Fresh snow blanketed the wilderness in untouched white. For the first time in days, the world seemed calm. Inside the hunting cabin, Ethan Walker sat beside the wood stove while Titan slept nearby. The German shepherd's condition had improved overnight. The swelling around his shoulder had begun to decrease. His breathing remained steady. It wasn't a full recovery, but it was enough to give Ethan hope. The old dog opened one eye. His tail thumped softly against the floor. "Morning, partner." Titan lifted his head. The simple gesture brought a smile to Ethan's face. Small victories mattered, especially now. While Titan rested, Ethan turned his attention back to the steel box. The box sat on the table where he had left it the previous night. Its scratched metal surface reflected the orange glow of the fire. For days, he had focused on the documents, the photographs, the maps. But Samuel Walker had hidden the box for a reason. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something remained undiscovered, something important. He began searching again, carefully, methodically. Every compartment, every panel, every inch. Hours passed. The cabin remained silent except for the crackling stove. Then his fingers found something unusual. A slight gap beneath the lower lining, almost invisible. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened. He reached for a pocket knife, slowly pried upward. The false bottom lifted. Hidden beneath it rested a small object wrapped in plastic. A cassette tape. Ethan stared. For several seconds he couldn't move. A cassette tape. 40 years old. Protected. Hidden. Waiting. The label contained only 2 words written in faded black marker. For Ethan. His hands trembled. Titan immediately noticed. The German Shepherd stood and moved closer, watching. The same way he always did when Ethan's emotions became difficult. Ethan swallowed hard. His father had written those words. His father had prepared this message. His father had expected someone to find it. Expected him to find it. The realization hit with enormous force. He searched the cabin and eventually found an old battery-powered cassette player inside a storage cabinet. Dust covered it, but it still worked. At least enough. Ethan cleaned the device carefully, inserted fresh batteries, then sat at the table. Titan rested beside his chair. The room suddenly felt smaller. The tape clicked into place. For several moments, he simply stared at it. 40 years. 40 years without hearing his father's voice. 40 years believing Samuel Walker was gone forever. Finally, Ethan pressed play. Static filled the cabin. A hiss, then silence, and then a voice. Older, calm, familiar. Ethan. The word shattered him. He hadn't heard that voice since childhood. Not truly. Memories flooded back instantly. Summer afternoons, horseback rides, fishing trips, lessons about honesty and responsibility. For a moment, he was a boy again. The tape continued. If you're hearing this, things happened exactly the way I feared they would. Ethan sat frozen. Every word mattered. Every breath. Every pause. Samuel's voice remained steady. I hope I'm wrong about what's coming. A brief crackle interrupted the recording. Then the voice returned. But if you found this tape, it means I didn't get the chance to finish what I started. Titan rested his head against Ethan's leg. The old dog seemed to sense the weight of the moment. Samuel continued. For years, I've been investigating people who are stealing land throughout this valley. Ethan exchanged a glance with the maps spread across the table. Confirmation. His father had discovered the same conspiracy decades earlier. The tape continued. What started as property fraud became something much bigger. Samuel paused, as if choosing his words carefully. I uncovered evidence linking local officials, investors, banks, and developers. Ethan's pulse quickened. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. Then came the words that changed everything. They murdered a man. Silence filled the cabin. The fire crackled softly. Outside, wind whispered through the pines. Inside, Ethan stopped breathing. Samuel's voice returned. A whistleblower. Another pause. He discovered what they were doing. Ethan stared at the tape recorder. They made his death look accidental. The room seemed to tilt. The conspiracy wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just stolen land. It wasn't just corruption. People had died. Samuel continued. I gathered evidence. Papers rustled somewhere in the recording. I hid copies where they couldn't find them. Another crackle. Then Samuel's voice lowered. If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they probably found me. The words hit like a hammer. Titan lifted his head. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't look away. His father continued speaking. The accident won't be an accident. A long silence followed, long enough to feel unbearable. Then came the sentence Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. They'll tell everyone I died hunting. The air left Ethan's lungs. No. The whisper escaped before he realized it. The tape continued. But if you're hearing this, I need you to know the truth. Samuel's voice cracked for the first time. I didn't fall. Another pause. I didn't get lost. A breath. If I'm dead, someone made sure of it. The cabin disappeared. The mountains disappeared. Everything disappeared. Only the voice remained. His father's voice, reaching across 40 years, delivering the truth. Samuel Walker had not died in an accident. He had been murdered. The realization struck with devastating force. Ethan lowered his head. Emotion overwhelmed him. Grief, rage, shock. All at once. For 40 years he had mourned a tragic accident. For 40 years he had accepted a lie. His father had been trying to protect people, trying to expose criminals, trying to save families from losing their land. And they killed him. The tape continued. If they succeed, Samuel's voice softened. Don't waste your life chasing revenge. Ethan closed his eyes. Tears threatened. I know you'll want to. A faint chuckle followed. You're my son. For the first time, a smile broke through the pain. Brief, painful, real. Then Samuel's voice grew serious again. Find the truth. Another pause. Protect the evidence. And remember that truth lasts longer than fear. The recording neared its end. If you're hearing this, Ethan, a final crackle. I love you. Silence. The tape clicked. Stopped. Finished. The cabin became still. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the fire seemed quieter. Ethan sat frozen for a very long time. Titan eventually rose, crossed the room, and gently rested his head against Ethan's chest. The old soldier wrapped both arms around the dog. For several minutes, neither moved. The grief came first, then anger, then purpose, because now everything made sense. The hidden chamber, the photographs, the steel box. Samuel Walker hadn't hidden evidence to protect himself. He had hidden it to protect the truth, and he had trusted that one day his son would find it. Outside, sunlight reflected across the mountains. Beautiful, peaceful, deceptive. Because somewhere beyond those ridges lived people who had spent 40 years protecting a lie. People who stole land. People who destroyed families. People who murdered a man trying to stop them. And now Ethan Walker knew exactly what they had done. The question was no longer whether the conspiracy existed. The question was how far its members would go to keep their secrets buried. Ethan looked toward the mountains. His eyes no longer carried uncertainty. Only determination. Because this fight was no longer about property, or money, or even the ranch. It was about his father, and the truth Samuel Walker had died trying to protect. The anger stayed with Ethan Walker long after the cassette stopped playing. Not the wild kind, not the reckless kind. Something colder, sharper, more focused. The kind of anger that turned into purpose. Outside the cabin, dawn painted the Bitterroot Mountains in pale gold. Fresh snow sparkled beneath the morning sun. The wilderness looked peaceful, but Ethan no longer saw peace when he looked at those mountains. He saw secrets. He saw lies. He saw 40 years of stolen lives hidden beneath beautiful scenery. Titan limped across the cabin floor. His shoulder was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. The old German shepherd carried himself with the same stubborn determination that had gotten both of them through difficult years. Ethan knelt beside him. You saved my life. Titan pressed his nose against Ethan's hand. The answer was simple. Of course he had. That's what partners did. Ethan smiled faintly. Then his expression hardened. It was time to stop reacting. Time to start planning. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught him one lesson above all others. When the enemy controlled the battlefield, you lost. When you controlled the battlefield, everything changed. And Ethan knew exactly where he wanted the battlefield to be. The mountain, the chamber, the place where the entire conspiracy had begun. By noon, he had reached Claire Bennett through a secure phone connection. The attorney listened quietly as Ethan described the cassette recording. For several moments after he finished, she said nothing. My God. Yeah. Ethan, her voice softened. I'm sorry. He stared out the cabin window. So am I. Then he got to the point. We need to finish this. Claire immediately understood. What's your plan? Ethan looked toward Titan. The German shepherd was already watching him, almost as if he knew what was coming. We make them come to us. Silence followed. Then Claire asked the question. How? Ethan smiled. The first genuine smile in days, by giving them exactly what they want. The next 48 hours became a carefully organized operation. Every step mattered. Every detail served a purpose. Claire quietly contacted trusted individuals outside the valley, not local authorities, not anyone connected to Pine Hollow, people with clean reputations, people who couldn't be influenced by local politics. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared the mountain. The hidden chamber became the center of everything. Using equipment borrowed from trusted sources, he installed cameras, audio recorders, backup recording systems, multiple layers of documentation. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. Just evidence. Pure evidence. If the conspirators came searching for the documents, Ethan intended to record every word, every threat, every admission, every mistake. Titan accompanied him throughout the process. Although injured, the dog insisted on helping. He tracked movement, alerted Ethan to unusual scents, warned him whenever someone approached the area. Years of K9 training still lived inside him, and Ethan trusted Titan's instincts more than any technology. By the third day, the trap was ready. All it needed was bait. That part proved surprisingly easy. A rumor, a carefully placed rumor, nothing more. Someone overheard mentioning missing documents. Someone mentioning that Ethan planned to return everything to the chamber. Someone mentioning that evidence remained hidden inside. The information spread exactly as expected. People chasing secrets rarely resisted bait, especially when fear was involved. Late that evening, Ethan and Titan settled into a concealed observation position overlooking the giant stone. The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Darkness settled across the valley. The temperature dropped rapidly. Titan rested beside him, alert, focused, ready. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Then shortly after midnight, headlights appeared below. Ethan immediately sat forward. 3 vehicles, moving without lights. Careful, professional. The convoy stopped near the old logging road. Doors opened. Several figures emerged. Dark clothing, flashlights, purposeful movement. Exactly what Ethan expected. Titan's ears rose. The dog quietly watched. The men moved toward the giant stone, toward the hidden chamber, toward the trap. Ethan activated the recording equipment. Every camera came online. Every microphone began capturing audio. The first man entered the chamber. Then another. Then another. Minutes passed. Voices echoed through Ethan's headphones. Frustrated, impatient, searching. The conspirators expected to find something. Instead, they found nothing, at least nothing obvious. One voice stood out immediately, confident, commanding, familiar. Ethan froze. He knew that voice. Everyone in Pine Hollow knew that voice. The realization hit hard, very hard. Titan looked toward him, as if sensing the shift. Ethan slowly turned up the volume. The voice continued. They had to bring it here. Another man answered. What if Walker already copied everything? The first voice responded sharply. Then find the originals. Silence followed. Then another statement. One that made Ethan's blood run cold. We covered this up for 40 years. The words echoed through the headphones. 40 years, confirmation, direct confirmation. The trap was working. The men continued searching. Their frustration grew. So did their conversation. As pressure increased, caution began disappearing. People made mistakes when they felt desperate. The recordings captured everything. Discussions about forged property records. Discussions about destroying evidence. Discussions about controlling investigations. The deeper they searched, the more they talked. And the more they talked, the worse things became for them. Then came the moment Ethan had been waiting for. The moment everything changed. One man finally asked the question, "What about Samuel Walker?" Silence. Several long seconds. Then the leader answered. A tired answer. An irritated answer. The answer of someone who believed nobody important was listening. We handled Samuel decades ago. Ethan's hands clenched. Titan slowly moved closer. The dog sensed the emotion, the tension, the significance. Inside the chamber, the conversation continued. But Ethan barely heard the next few words, because that single sentence confirmed everything. His father, the cover-up, the conspiracy, the lies, all of it. Real, documented, recorded. For the first time since discovering the giant stone, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Control. The truth was no longer hidden. The truth was speaking for itself. The mountain had become a witness. The cameras had become witnesses. And the men responsible were exposing themselves exactly as planned. The operation continued for nearly 2 hours. By the time the vehicles finally departed, Ethan possessed enough recorded evidence to destroy everything they had built. 40 years of corruption. 40 years of fraud. 40 years of silence. Now preserved forever. Ethan remained hidden until the vehicles disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he stand. The cold night air filled his lungs. Above him, thousands of stars glittered across the Montana sky. Titan slowly rose beside him. The German shepherd's injured shoulder still troubled him, but his eyes remained bright. Steady. Loyal. Ethan looked down at his partner. We got them. Titan's tail moved. Once, then again. The simple gesture felt perfect, because for the first time since finding the giant stone, victory seemed possible. Not guaranteed, not complete, but possible. And somewhere beyond the mountains, powerful people still believed they controlled the story. They had no idea that the story was about to control them. The sun rose slowly over western Montana. Golden light spilled across the snow-covered ridges. The wilderness looked peaceful, untouched, as if nothing had happened, as if 40 years of lies weren't about to collapse. Ethan Walker stood outside the hunting cabin with Titan beside him. The German shepherd's shoulder was healing. The limp remained. But each day he moved a little stronger, a little faster, a little closer to the dog he had been before the ambush. Titan watched the valley below, alert, focused, the same way he had watched battlefields years earlier. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. We're almost there, partner. For the first time in a long while, he believed it. The recordings from the mountain trap had changed everything. Hours of conversations, direct admissions, references to forged records, destroyed evidence, corruption, and Samuel Walker. The men who thought they were protecting their secret had handed over exactly what Ethan needed: the truth. Claire Bennett arrived shortly after noon. She parked near the cabin and climbed through the snow carrying a locked case. The moment she entered, Ethan saw the excitement in her eyes. They got it. He stood immediately. Who? The investigators. Relief flooded through him. Days earlier, Claire had quietly forwarded copies of the evidence to trusted federal contacts outside Montana. People with authority. People who couldn't easily be influenced. People who took corruption seriously. Now they were finally moving. Claire placed the case on the table. Inside sat additional backup drives, copies of recordings, property records, financial documents. The entire conspiracy was preserved in multiple locations. Even if someone tried to destroy one copy, others would survive. Ethan nodded. Good. Claire smiled. No, Ethan. Better than good. She pulled out a folder. Several names were highlighted. The investigators had already begun comparing evidence, already connecting pieces, already finding inconsistencies that stretched back decades. The case was growing faster than anyone expected. For the first time, the people responsible were losing control. Outside, clouds drifted across the mountains. Inside, hope returned. But not everyone was celebrating. Miles away, inside an office overlooking downtown Pine Hollow, another man sat staring at a phone. Richard Grayson, businessman, philanthropist, community leader. At least that was how the town knew him. For years, Richard had sponsored charity events, veterans programs, school fundraisers. Everyone respected him, trusted him, admired him. Few people knew how much land he controlled. Even fewer knew how he acquired it. The phone rang again. Another bad update. Another problem. Richard listened quietly, then ended the call. For the first time in decades, fear touched him. Because someone had survived. Someone had found evidence, and someone refused to stop. Back at the cabin, Ethan reviewed the recordings one final time. Titan slept beside the stove. The dog's breathing was steady, peaceful. Ethan almost envied him. Humans complicated everything. Dogs never did. By evening, Claire received another call. This one changed everything. She listened carefully, then slowly lowered the phone. Ethan. He looked up. What is it? They want us at the chamber tomorrow. His pulse quickened. Why? Claire smiled. Because they're ready. The following morning dawned cold and clear. The mountains stretched beneath bright blue skies. Snow sparkled across the wilderness. The giant stone waited exactly where Titan had first found it. Silent, ancient, watching. Several vehicles were already parked near the old logging road. Investigators, legal representatives, evidence specialists. Everyone moved carefully, professionally. The chamber itself had become the center of attention, the place where decades of lies finally converged. Titan walked beside Ethan as they approached. The old German shepherd moved slowly but proudly, like a soldier returning to a battlefield he had survived. Inside the chamber, equipment illuminated the stone walls. Investigators reviewed recordings, photographs, documents. Everything pointed in the same direction. The conspiracy was real. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came the moment no one expected. A convoy arrived. Black SUVs, the same kind Ethan had seen watching him for weeks. Doors opened. Several men stepped out. Among them stood Richard Grayson. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The respected businessman looked calm, confident, as if nothing could touch him. Then the recordings began playing. His expression changed. The voices echoed through the chamber. The admissions, the conversations, the references to fraud, the references to cover-ups. One by one, the lies unraveled. Richard remained silent. At first. Then investigators presented the property records, the forged signatures, the financial transfers, the shell companies. More evidence. More pressure. The walls slowly closed around him. Ethan watched quietly. Titan sat beside him, waiting, listening. The same way he had listened during missions overseas. Then came the final recording. The conversation captured inside the chamber. The conversation mentioning Samuel Walker. The words filled the room. "We handled Samuel decades ago." Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that changes lives. Richard's confidence finally cracked. His face hardened. His jaw tightened. One investigator leaned forward. What did that mean? No answer. Another question followed. Still silence. Then more evidence. More recordings. More documents. Pressure built steadily, until finally Richard spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough. A frustrated comment. A careless sentence. A mistake. But it was enough. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive through confession. Sometimes it arrives through arrogance. Richard muttered something about Samuel causing problems. Something about keeping people quiet. Something about protecting investments. The chamber became silent. Everyone understood. The words weren't a full confession. They didn't need to be. Combined with everything else, they completed the picture. 40 years of corruption, fraud, intimidation, and a cover-up surrounding Samuel Walker's death. The investigators moved quickly after that. The process became official, professional, careful. No dramatic arrests, no shouting, just consequences. The kind built through evidence, the kind that lasts. Hours later, as the chamber slowly emptied, Ethan remained behind. Titan sat beside him. Claire joined them. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The mountain felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the truth itself had changed the atmosphere. Claire finally broke the silence. You did it. Ethan looked around the chamber, at the stone walls, at the place where everything began. Then he shook his head. No. He rested a hand on Titan's neck. We did it. Titan looked up immediately. His tail moved against the stone floor. Claire smiled. Outside, sunlight flooded the valley. The conspiracy was collapsing. The lies were ending. And for the first time since finding the giant stone, Ethan Walker felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Justice. Not complete. Not yet. But real. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the truth was finally beginning to reach the people who deserved to hear it. Spring arrived slowly in the Bitterroot Valley. Snow retreated from the lower hillsides. Creeks swelled with mountain runoff. Fields that had slept beneath winter's grip slowly turned green again. Life returned to western Montana. And for Ethan Walker, life was finally returning too. The months following the investigation felt almost unreal. For so long, every day had been about survival. Finding food, finding shelter, managing PTSD, enduring loneliness. Now, for the first time in years, the future seemed possible. Not easy, not perfect, but possible. The evidence uncovered inside the chamber continued producing results. Investigators expanded the case. Additional records surfaced. More victims came forward. Families who had lost land decades earlier finally learned they had not imagined the fraud. They had not failed. They had been deceived. The truth spread through the valley like sunlight reaching places hidden in shadow. And with every new discovery, Samuel Walker's name was slowly restored. no longer remembered as a man who had died in a tragic accident, now remembered as a man who had tried to stop something wrong, a man who had sacrificed everything to protect the truth. One bright morning, Ethan stood outside a courthouse overlooking Pine Hollow. Titan sat beside him. The German shepherd's shoulder had healed remarkably well. A slight limp remained, a permanent reminder, a scar. But Ethan understood scars. Some scars hurt, others proved survival. Today, Titan's scar felt like the second kind. Claire Bennett emerged through the courthouse doors carrying a thick folder. She smiled before she even reached them. The expression told Ethan everything, but he still asked, "Well?" Claire handed him the paperwork. "It's official." For a moment he simply stared. The words blurred, not because he couldn't read them, because he never truly believed this day would come. Walker Ridge Ranch. Ownership restored. Legally returned. After all these years, after all the lies, after all the loss. The ranch was his again. Ethan lowered the papers. His eyes drifted toward the mountains beyond town, toward the land that had shaped generations of his family, the place he thought he had lost forever. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "You earned this." Ethan shook his head. "No." He looked down at Titan. "We earned it." Titan's tail immediately thumped against the sidewalk, making Claire laugh. The sound felt good, normal, human, the kind of moment Ethan once thought was gone forever. Several weeks later, Ethan drove slowly up the ranch road, the same road he had traveled countless times as a younger man. Wildflowers lined the fences. Cottonwood trees swayed in the spring breeze. The house stood at the end of the lane, weathered, a little older, but still standing, still home. His throat tightened. Titan sat beside him in the truck, watching. The old dog seemed unusually calm, almost thoughtful, as if he understood where they were. Maybe he did. Dogs often understood more than people gave them credit for. When Ethan stepped from the truck, memories hit immediately. Summer evenings, family dinners, laughter, horseback rides, his daughter's childhood, his father's lessons, his mother's garden. Every corner of the property carried a memory. For years, those memories had felt painful. Now they felt different, still bittersweet, but no longer broken. The truth had changed them. The truth had healed them. The front porch creaked beneath his boots. The same sound, the same familiar rhythm. Ethan smiled. Then another vehicle appeared in the driveway. A small SUV. His pulse quickened. He already knew who it was. The driver stepped out slowly. Emily Walker. His daughter. The person he had not truly spoken with in years. Life had pushed them apart. Pain had pushed them farther. Misunderstandings had done the rest. For a moment, neither moved. Both seemed uncertain. Both carried years of distance. Then Emily smiled. A small smile. Tentative. Hopeful. "Dad." Ethan swallowed hard. "Hey, kid." Neither knew what to say next. Sometimes the hardest conversations begin that way. Fortunately, Titan solved the problem. The German shepherd trotted forward. Emily immediately knelt, laughing as Titan greeted her enthusiastically. The tension shattered. Just like that. A dog accomplished what words could not. Some things never changed. Hours later, they sat together on the porch, talking. Really talking. For the first time in years. About Samuel. About the ranch. About the truth. About everything they had lost. And everything they still had. As sunset painted the valley gold, Emily handed Ethan a folder. "There's something else." He frowned. What? Found it while going through old records. Inside were photographs, training records, breeding documents, ranch journals dating back decades. Ethan slowly turned the pages, then froze. One photograph showed a German shepherd standing beside his grandfather. Another showed working dogs helping around the ranch. Another showed litters raised on the property generations earlier. Titan noticed the photographs immediately. His ears perked up. Ethan kept reading. The realization came gradually. Then all at once. The bloodline, the records, the names, the dates. His eyes widened. No way. Emily laughed. What? Ethan held up one of the papers. The ranch had once maintained a line of working German shepherds, carefully bred, highly regarded throughout the region. The bloodline extended through decades, and according to the records, Titan's lineage traced directly back to them. The old dog looked up, completely unaware of the revelation. Ethan stared at him. A strange feeling settled over him. Not destiny, not magic. Something simpler. Something real. Life. The strange way life sometimes circles back on itself. For years, Titan had been his partner, his protector, his family. Now he learned that the dog's ancestors once lived on this very ranch, walked these same fields, ran these same trails, long before either of them were born. Emily shook her head. Kind of unbelievable. Ethan smiled softly. Yeah. But deep down, it felt right. Months earlier, Titan had led him to the giant stone, to the hidden chamber, to the truth. Now another truth stood before him. The dog had unknowingly guided him back to the place where both of their stories began. Several days later, Ethan climbed a small hill overlooking the ranch. Titan walked beside him. The evening sky glowed orange and purple. A gentle wind moved through the grass. In his hands, Ethan carried a simple memorial stone. Nothing elaborate, nothing grand, just honest, like Samuel Walker himself. He placed the stone beneath a lone pine tree overlooking the valley, then stepped back. The inscription was simple. Samuel Walker. A good man who told the truth. Ethan stood quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. The homelessness, the loneliness, the PTSD, the betrayal, the mountain, the chamber, the recordings, the fight, the truth. Every step had led here. Titan sat beside him, scarred, older, but alive, always loyal, always present, always refusing to leave his side. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's neck. The sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. Golden light flooded the valley one final time. And in that moment, Ethan finally understood something. The greatest treasure had never been hidden inside the chamber. It wasn't the land. It wasn't the evidence. It wasn't the money. It was the truth. The family he regained, the peace he found, and the loyal dog who refused to abandon him when the world did. Titan hadn't just found a giant stone. He had led Ethan home. And for the first time in many years, Ethan Walker felt exactly where he belonged. If you believe loyalty still matters, comment 1. If you think the truth always finds its way to the surface, comment 0. Sometimes justice takes years, but standing your ground and never giving up can change everything. And if stories about courage, dignity, and perseverance mean something to you, subscribe and join us for the next journey through the land of the free.